to Time with Terry, coming to you from the Space Coast of sunny Florida. I'm Terry, a retired PT assistant who has worked with seniors my entire career. In this podcast, I would like to make it my mission to be a senior advocate to connect you with an amazing network of resources to help you navigate this stage in your life. Because in Brevard County, we care about our seniors. Now, my trivia question today is, what is the most common reported early sign of caregiver burnout? And the reason I'm asking that question is because of my guest, Zach McGuire, who works with Amedysis. And we are going to talk about caregiver burnout and ways to cope. And Zach and I have been talking. I was a caregiver for my mother, and we had a nice long conversation the other day and wonderful ways of coping. And I heard you speak at Joe's Club, and when you spoke, I was like, I got to get him on the show.
Absolutely.
So we talked, and you're like, sure. So welcome to the show. We will give the answer. Usually I give the answer at the end of the show, but we're going to be talking about that, so that it's going to come pretty quickly into the
Yeah.
into the interview.
It's hard when it's the focus of the topic.
All right. So tell us about yourself, Zach. You were born in New Jersey.
Yeah, I'm from New Jersey. I grew up in Gloucester City, and I made my way down here to Florida for college. And I originally went to FIT to be a weatherman, and I started taking psychology classes, and I really fell in love with it. So I ended up getting my undergrad from Florida Tech in psychology, and then I later got my master's degree in social work from the University of Kentucky.
And you are a medical social worker. And so, what is your role as a social worker, medical social worker, and some misconceptions that people may have about social workers?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of misconceptions about social workers. I'd say the most common one is that most people think that we just work for DCF and we're coming out to take your children away or take your loved one away, but that's really not actually the case.
Right.
Social work is a very broad field, and we work on many different levels, the micro, meso, and macro levels. What I do falls in the micro level because it's direct care to patients and their loved ones. So specifically as a medical social worker, I like to view social workers as a Swiss Army knife. We have a bunch of tools that we're trained to use. We're able to gather resources. We're trained in many different therapeutic techniques. We just do a lot. We advocate, and as a medical social worker in particular, we have to have a broader knowledge of what's going on in the medical field and the diagnoses that we're going to be dealing with, the medications that we use. We have to know a little bit more about insurances, particularly Medicare, Medicaid. But I feel that that our sharpest tool on that knife is definitely the therapeutic element that we bring, and it's something that's really important to the patient and their loved ones. It's something that's become more popular recently, people getting the mental health treatment and everything, but unfortunately it hasn't always been that way. So it's been nice to see a change, but definitely providing therapy is the most important thing that we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that was kind of ignored for a long time, and now it's great that they are paying more attention to the mental health aspect of a lot of things, but especially with caregiving, because you can get burned out, and trying to find ways to cope is very important. I know, and I was reading about there's like a 3-arc, first of all, we need to understand what it is.
Yeah, you're not going to really be able to fix something that you don't understand, right?
Right.
So identification is the biggest. That's why this podcast is so great, because it's getting information out there, because people don't know. And when we get involved, a lot of times it's too late. So when I come into a house, it's very evident when we see a caregiver that's burnt out. And it's really unfortunate because that burnout leads to less quality care. And then for the caregiver themselves, all the symptoms that come with it, the fatigue, the depression, the anxiety, pain. They have higher rates of chronic illness. So really getting that education out there on what caregiver burnout is so important. And what that is it's that extreme level of stress from that ongoing role, and it's financial, it's everything that comes with
Yeah,
being a
financial and
caregiver.
physical. Yeah, I
Yep,
mean,
all of it.
and the answer to the trivia question was the most common factor is persistent fatigue,
Yeah.
because you're exhausted. First of all, sometimes you don't get enough sleep, or you're just stressed out over the situation, and so so it's great that you're on to help us, help people have ways of coping with that. But it said, like, okay, so like understanding, recognizing it, and coping. So if you understand it and then you recognize it, it's like, oh, okay, yes, this is caregiver burnout.
Yeah.
So how can I cope with this? So
Yeah. So, what we do is we apply evidence-based practice to help deal with these things. We don't just come in and just throw a whole bunch of things at you that we don't know if it's going to work or not. I mean, the techniques that we use are based in research. They're tried against control studies, and they go through that whole scientific method. We know that they're effective at doing what they're supposed to do. So some of those coping skills could be as simple as, getting that time away from your loved one, taking an hour each day, going for a walk. Exercise is probably one of the most studied things for especially anxiety and depression, at reducing that stress. So even getting out and going for that walk, elevating the heart rate could reduce those. Some people, though, they can't get somebody to watch their loved one, so they're still in the house. And, I like to think of myself and the things that I take for granted that I do for coping skills. And I know that we've talked about this before, but I'm a big fan of going over and hand washing dishes, just scrubbing away at those dishes, and it helps. It gets the stress out. It gives you time away from the person, and it gets your mind off of it.
yeah, right, because sometimes you just have to walk away.
Yeah.
You can get frustrated, and if you just walk away from the person and go in and scrub them. I know
And just scrub away.
just scrub those. They'll be the cleanest dishes that you've ever had. Yeah, clean them even if they're not dirty. Clean your dishes. Just something, because like you said, sometimes you can't leave. You can't leave the house, and it's like, and you love the person, and I know, and I mean, guilt. Sometimes you feel guilty because it's. I know one of my questions is, how can guilt or a sense of obligation make burnout worse?
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's something we see all the time. The guilt is probably what will lead to the most prolonged issues, because we start yelling at our loved one because of that burnout, that stress you're feeling. Your frustration tolerance is gone. So even the smallest things will lead to big responses. And then when we're laying in bed that night, that's when you're thinking to yourself, wow, I really, I wish I didn't yell at them. And, it starts leading to the emotional side of things toward yourself. And it's important to know that you're not alone there. I mean, we all go through it. One of the things that I do is, I have family members come to me all the time, and they tell me the crazy thoughts that they have, and just, a little bit of humor for them. And hey, I see it every day. It's normal. There's nothing wrong with what you're feeling. We all, yell at our loved ones. It's no different than if you have kids. We've all yelled at our kids. It's just part of, it's part of the process. And but ideally, we want to reduce that, so you don't have to feel that guilt, and that's where your coping skills are going to come into play. And there's a lot of them. particularly when we get involved, there's a lot of trying to change those thoughts because we like to follow that cognitive behavioral model. And what we see is people have, the negative thoughts is what comes first. And then that leads to the negative emotions and then the negative behaviors. So if you're in that constant state of negativity, that's when we start seeing the depression, the anxiety, and everything like that. So,
And two, you can't sleep either. It's like, when you feel guilty. I know because when I took care of my mom, sometimes I just would get frustrated. And then you lay down at night and then you're like, oh, I should have been more patient with her. I shouldn't have said that or shouldn't have done that. And then you can't sleep.
absolutely.
And then when you can't sleep, then that messes up everything too. And that can make you more tired and more depressed as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, just in this quick conversation that we've already had, you can see how nasty of a cycle it becomes. And not having a plan is just going to exacerbate everything. It makes it so much worse. So being able to identify it's absolutely the first step. You want to know what you're looking for, and you want to be able to identify your resources and your skills. So that's one of the first things that we do when we come in is we want to figure out who your support system is, like who you can rely on, what family members, do you go to church, do you have neighbors, like identifying those people and getting them to help you out, to give you that time to yourself goes a long way. And then, of course, having the coping skills is the other question that we'll ask. We'll figure out what your hobbies are, what you like to do, how do you decompress, get rid of the stress. The biggest ones are always watching TV, reading, music, going for walks. A lot of people rely on their faith, which is a very powerful tool for them. But the thing that they all have in common is they take your mind off the task. If you're engulfing in a book, you're engulfing in TV, really immersing yourself, right. You're thinking about that. You're not thinking about your duty as a caregiver, and that's what's going to start getting rid of the stress, and that's what's going to give you mentally and physically a break from those duties. So,
yeah, the emotions. One of the other questions is, what emotions do caregivers commonly struggle with but barely talk about? And I think that they probably just display. You can, when you walk into a room and you're like, okay, I know you're not saying anything, but I know like you are really burned out and stressed out over this.
yeah.
So it's like, like they may not recognize it and talk about it because, that's your loved one and you feel you want to take care of them. And, and so, you want to do everything you can, but it can wear on you. And, and I just think too, people, if people can be a little bit more empathetic to people who are taking care of their loved ones and just do something. Like if people say, well, what can I do to help? Have a list for people, they may not necessarily like can mow the lawn or that kind of stuff, but maybe they could just sit, maybe they could just sit with the person and you can take a nap, take a walk or sometimes just take a nap, or just go into a different room and kind of focus on something else.
Yeah,
it's good too.
It's really anything to get away from it. And you brought up
just temporarily, just temporarily.
Absolutely. Yeah. You bring up when people ask, and that's the other thing that we find very common is that people don't take advantage of those opportunities. They turn that down. Or if we ask about family members and stuff like that, they're like, oh, well, they're not really involved. And you ask them, would they help you? And usually they say no. And you say, well, have you asked them? And the answer is usually, again, no. It's like, okay. That's a conversation that needs to be had. So it's reaching out to those people, and if they say no, they say no, but you have to at least try to get your ducks in a line. You have to try to get some help. And that starts with usually going, after your family members, the people that really should be there helping you.
Right. But they don't always, though.
No, they don't.
Very, very seldom do they. Because, if you ask them and, you're just like, hey, or you just say, hey, I'm a little stressed out here. Can you help me out a little bit? And they're like, oh, well, I'm busy with this and that. And you're like, So be a little bit more sensitive, People, please be more sensitive to those who are caregivers, just a little, there's just little things that you can do just to kind of, ease the stress for just a little bit, So I just, people from church though you're saying that people from church sometimes will offer, and it's not, they don't have to do big things,
They
but
really don't.
yeah, just, or if they want to wash the dishes, but that's a coping skill. So maybe
Yeah.
have them do something else. You
Yeah.
can do the dishes to relieve your stress, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true. You want to be able to use some of the skills that you have, but the dishes might not be a coping skill for everybody. They could be a
True.
more of a challenge, more of a burden. So I mean, if they'll do the dishes for you and give you some time.
Yeah, true. Yeah, because maybe people don't, they have a stack of dishes and they just don't want to deal with that. And if
Yeah.
somebody says, I'll wash your dishes, Yeah, I had a friend of mine too. Oh my gosh, she had so many dishes one time, and I can't. It was so long ago, but I think she was sick, and I said, well, what can I do for you, Barbara? And she said, well, you can do the dishes. I looked in the kitchen. I was like, that's a lot of dishes, but I was like, hey, if it would help her out, so I washed her dishes for her, and she was grateful, and so. So that's good. So sometimes, yeah, that is a good thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would have been her guy. I would have been in there scrubbing them every day. She said,
Yeah.
don't worry about it.
Yeah, yeah. I never minded doing dishes though that much. No, because I don't have dirty dishes in my sink. I might have clean stacked out, but no
Yeah.
dirty dishes.
You
But
probably
anyway,
like
but
doing them.
just yeah, but yeah. So some other things like you said, like walking or. Just reading a book, just sitting reading a book, or even if like my mom, I'm not a big reader. I like to watch TV, but some people, even if you can't leave the house, just if you can sit there and just read for a little bit, is
Yeah, absolutely. And then even those coping skills sometimes may not be enough. And when we've reached that level, I do strongly recommend seeking professional help. Talking to somebody, a therapist, social worker, clinical psychologist, whoever you can find. If you have insurance, you can call them. They can give you a list. 211 is a great resource in our county. You could always call 211 and they'll point you to where you want to go. But there are other coping skills that we use that fall in that, evidence-based practice. Progressive muscle relaxation is a great one. There's breathing techniques that we can do. They can do a little bit more in-depth of a dive, something I could talk about on here, but I can't really teach over this. But there are other things that a professional could do for you. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
well, is that something as a medical social worker you have to offer them?
Yeah, so social workers at my level, I don't have my license just yet, but I'm a couple months away. I become a licensed clinical social worker, but we all are trained in that cognitive behavioral therapy, and we'll learn some skills that they'll teach us how to do progressive muscle relaxation, and plus they offer a lot of the continuing education and stuff that we can go do and learn different techniques to use to teach to our patients and their family members. So
That's good.
yeah.
Well, and like I was saying about talking to our loved ones about help. I mean, do you have any ways, any advice on how we can approach our siblings or our loved ones about that?
So that's another thing that I think is a great reason why we're doing this, because that starts here with us, right? And it's educating them on how significant of a role being a caregiver is. A lot of what being a caregiver is it's perceived stress. So on the outside, you may look at it and say that's not so bad, but that's not what the caregiver's saying. And what the caregiver perceives oftentimes can be a lot worse than what it looks like on the outside. So really educating those family members on what a caregiver actually goes through is the first step, because once they see that level, what that level of burnout can do to somebody, they could be more inclined to help. And I'm not saying that they all will, because we all have those siblings and family members that that probably won't step up. But
Right.
if we can get at least one out there to help and step up, we're making a difference.
Right. Right. That was good. I mean, my sister lived, my mom lived with me at the kind of the beginning of her Alzheimer's, and then at the end. And my sister was great. She lived about 5 miles up the road, and so she was great at helping out. So that was nice. My brothers are out of state, but that was great that I had my sister. So
Yeah.
it was good. So because if I wanted to go out and do interviews or networking, she would stay with my mom, which was a really nice thing, because then I didn't have to miss out on too much with that.
And for those family members that are out of state, getting help is oftentimes it can be expensive. So we do have resources in the county. There's companies that can send caregivers to the house to give you a break. There's respite care. You can send them to places like Joe's Club, and they'll watch them for the day and everything like that. But all these things have a price. So, I mean, even if they can't physically come here and help, maybe they can help get some financial resources together to help take care of getting that help.
With Joe's Club, yeah, because Joe's Club is a great resource. Yes.
They are so amazing.
Yeah.
Especially because they take, I mean, the Alzheimer's dementia people, that's probably the hardest population to deal with, but
Right.
they offer a great service.
Right, because you can. It's like it is an adult daycare.
Yeah.
And you can have them. For some people, they'll pick them up at the house. They'll take them there, and then they bring them home. So that worked out great when I was working. So they would come to the house, pick her up, and then at the end of the day, they would drop her off. So, and she had it 5 days a week, which was great. So during the day, I knew that she was taken care of, and she loved it. My mom was cute when she would go to Joe's Club. Which she helped. My mom worked for Alzheimer's. My mom had Alzheimer's, and she worked for the Alzheimer's Association. And when she went, my mom was very hospitable. She was very outgoing, loved people. And so, if new people would come in, she'd say, try to make them feel welcome, everything. And she told everybody that she had a job. My mom was like 85 at the time.
Adorable.
And she's like, I know. And she's like, she told my brother, I have a job. And Joe's like, what job does mom have? And I said, it's a job, Joe. She's at Joe's Club. And so she told everybody. We went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, when she said, yeah, I have a job. And he's like, I said, she has a job. She has a job at Joe's Club, and she's like the hospitality queen. So, and everybody was fine with it, too. Everybody was good because they knew my mom, and they knew how, she worked with Alzheimer's and, in the community and helped get Joe's Club started. She worked with Joe Steckler. But anyway, that is a good outlet for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because they're great. They know how to deal with Alzheimer's and dementia. And I know that is tough. That is hard, because when they ask you, 10 times in a row the same question, it kind of can get a little frustrating at times.
Especially once you're in that stage of burnout.
You're right.
Because that's when we start snapping on them.
Mm-hmm.
Something that, if you're not under that much stress and you're not burnt out, typically you can redirect them and just deal with it. But
right. But there's no redirecting sometimes sometimes you can for like a few minutes, and then, and then it's again, but it's not their fault. You just have to, it's not their fault. They're not asking for this. So, you need to be patient, but, some days you can, some days it's harder than others, but,
And that's a big thing too, is restructuring your own thoughts about what's going on. You have to stop and ask yourself, like, they're not doing this to me on purpose.
Right.
This is the disease. And when you remind yourself that, it can go a long way in reducing that stress as well, and keeping you tolerant and
yeah. And right. And I was telling you too that my mom, when I was I'm not a morning person to begin with, but my mom, I'm trying to get to work and getting her ready to go. And I wanted her to sit down and have her breakfast. She just would not sit down. She would just keep getting up and going in her room. And I'm like, Mom, I got to go to work. Can you sit down here and have your breakfast? And it's just like, this was like day after day. And then My mother, who had Alzheimer's, she had a solution to this. She said, "Well, I'll just take a breakfast bar and I'll drink my coffee and eat my breakfast in there." And I'm like, oh, "That was great." That was great. And she
And
she had dementia and she solved that issue and I was like, "There you go." Now my mornings were not so frustrating anymore.
and that's
But,
that's one of the big ones is not dying on a hill, right?
right.
So there can be a simple solution like that
Mm-hmm.
that when we're too stressed out, we don't think clearly, and we can't easily find those solutions.
Yeah.
And that's another reason that going to like a caregivers group is an amazing
Yes.
thing to do, because you can learn little tricks like that from people that may be going through the same thing, that may have already,
Mm-hmm.
solved that issue.
Right.
So caregiver groups are great because you
Right.
don't have to reinvent the wheel. Somebody already went through it and they can tell you how to deal with it,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes life a lot easier.
That's true. And we have there are a lot of support groups in this area.
Yeah.
So, and they're all over the county. So if you're looking for a support group, you can probably just look up support groups. I know Your Life has one. I go to that every month, but there are a lot of different. Joe's Club has. Is it just quarterly that they
Yeah,
have the support group?
they do the quarterly they do the
Oh,
caregivers cafe, yeah. But
Okay.
Joe's Club, they have a lot of resources too on those support groups. They were talking about that when we were there.
Okay.
But another good place to get resources is Joe's Club for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Helping Seniors of Brevard here, they could
It's
call Helping Seniors of
huge one,
Brevard, right?
huge one.
And they could contact them. They
Always
could give
call
them
them.
yes,
Always call Helping Seniors of Brevard. They have plenty of resources. They can help you out.
right. And depending on what part of town, I mean, they're in Vieira, West Melbourne. I'm sure there's some beachside.
Hmm.
So right, right, it is great because sometimes. You just feel like you're at your wit's end, and you go to a support group, and they're like, "Oh yeah, well, this worked for me," and you're like, "Oh, okay, great," because people have been through what we've been through, and it's like, okay, because you just have to try, like you said, not to die on that hill,
Exactly.
and get another resolution. Is there another solution to this problem? Instead of just getting frustrated, okay, let's think, how else can we do this? But yeah, so I was like, okay, yeah, that was great. That worked out just fine. I was like, thank you, Mom.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mom. But she had 4 kids, like you were saying. She had kids and she resolved problems, so it was still in there, you
Yeah.
know.
It is a lot like having kids, and you learn those little tricks. I know I was telling you about it. I do the same thing with my kids. I don't fight them in the morning to get them to sit down and eat. And we
Hmm.
do breakfast in the car on the way. So it's just
It
little
works,
tricks you can learn. It's
right? So not to get so frustrated, because I know sometimes you're like, okay, well, there's probably something else that we could do that I don't want to get frustrated and you know. So like, what message do you wish every caregiver could hear today?
that they're not alone. That is absolutely the biggest one. Being a caregiver leaves you isolated. You can't go out and do the things you used to. You're not getting out and going to work. You might not be getting out and going to church if you were doing church on Sundays. Um, some people aren't even getting out to go grocery shopping anymore.
Yeah.
It's so you losing contact with friends and family, and you become isolated. And when you're isolated, you feel alone,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not. There's resources out there, and there's other people that are going through the same thing, and you have help, and
Right.
people are more than willing to give that help. So it's
Yeah, I mean, and there's different organizations. I mean, there are some home health agencies, but
hmm
some of them cost money.
absolutely.
Seniors helping seniors. It depends on what level they're at. You have that, but yeah, there are resources out there, or church. You can always watch church online,
Yeah.
and if they can talk to the people in church, maybe they can come over after church and talk with them and sit with them for a while, or just say, hey, you know what? We'll stay with your mom for a while. Why don't you go out and, get your groceries?
And that is funny you bring that up. One of the funniest things that I hear from caregivers is people always offer to drop their groceries off to them. And they're like, I want to go to the grocery store. Like, I don't want someone to drop off my groceries. So
Yeah.
so if you're that person that wants to get groceries for somebody and drop them off, maybe offer sitting with the loved one instead of getting the groceries so they can go do it themselves, because that
Right.
trip to the grocery store is huge for somebody. Getting away from the person that they're taking care of to get that time out. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the grocery store can be a great experience too, because mindfulness is one of the biggest things that we preach. It's being present in that moment, and that's again how you get away from your thoughts as being a caregiver, is to get away from those thoughts. And the grocery
Right.
store, you have so much opportunity. You have fresh fruits and vegetables you can smell and
Mm-hmm.
and
A lot,
taste and whatever you got to do,
right. There's a
But
lot of stimulation. A lot of
exactly,
stimulation in the grocery store.
it could be a great place for somebody that needs a break.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. And then all you have to do is decide, do I get the apples? Do I get pears? Or do I get both? Or what kind of cereal or whatever?
Which
You can make a different, decision than you do as a caregiver.
exactly,
Yeah.
away from that typical responsibility that you have.
Yeah, that's good. And, one of the questions is too, though, like, what if there is no one, if there's no one there to help, if you don't have any family or, and then if you don't have friends, you know, what can people do?
That is significantly more common than I would like for it to be in my role. Now, as a hospice social worker, we have a lot more resources, because when somebody is on hospice, we can offer that 5-day respite care where your loved one goes to a skilled nursing home for 5 days. We're able to offer that to give them a break. But if you're not on hospice, your choices become really limited, and that's where a place like Joe's Club again could come in handy. Calling a private caregiver, giving a call to the Senior Resource Center, using that 211, and just going through your options and trying to get that plan in place, because doing nothing isn't going to solve your problems. You have to try to get a hold of somebody. And I know I bring up hospice, and that's
Oh, no.
it's a scary thing for a lot of people, but hospice is one of the single greatest resources that
It
that you
is.
can have for a loved one, especially with dementia, if they qualify.
Right.
So hospice has changed a lot over the years. It's no longer that, it's
Well, the H word, I know when people hear hospice, they're like, oh my gosh, if I get a hospice, I'm going to like die tomorrow. Or
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine who said, she said, oh, your mom's on hospice. She goes, they just want you to die. And I'm like, no, they don't. I was like, now what kind of business would that be if you just want people to die?
Wouldn't be a good business
Like,
model.
no,
I promise everybody that
Right.
we get paid while our patients are alive, so we don't want them to die.
Right.
And honestly, we used to, for hospice, one of the selling points was the quality over quantity. And I don't even really think we can use that as a selling point anymore, because research is now showing that on average people on hospice live 3 months longer.
Nice.
I'm not going to directly quote somebody, but if you guys want to Google it, you can. You'll see it. It's there. So in hospice can actually extend the time that you have with your loved one, as well as giving you that resource. So.
Yeah, hospice is wonderful. My mom had hospice, and it was great having the nurses, and people come into your home too, so it's kind of nice. You have people to talk to.
More break, yep.
Yes.
More respite, more people to talk to.
Yeah.
It gets rid of that isolation, a little bit more opportunity for some time to yourself. Plus the nurse being there and knowing that your loved one is getting checked out, it's also very helpful.
Right.
So I like to not really associate hospice with death, because I would like to see more people go on hospice when they find out that they're eligible. And what
Right.
that eligibility is if you have a doctor saying that you have 6 months or less. So 6 months is a long time that you can get
Right.
a lot of help. So
Right. A lot of good care.
Yeah.
Nursing, and the CNA comes in a couple times a week.
Yeah.
And the social worker comes in.
Absolutely.
And especially if you need to talk, if you need to talk things through, you have somebody to talk to. But hospice is wonderful. I think it's a fantastic service. And so, yeah, so Amedysis Hospice is, and I've met some of I worked with Amedysis about 15 years ago, and they were a great company, and I've always heard good things about the company.
Yeah, yeah, we really focus on the patient and the family, and what matters most to the family. And then you brought up that aid. We actually are allowed to do it 5 days a week.
Oh, really?
For Amedysis.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow,
so
that's great.
we can send them out Monday through Friday, and
Nice.
that is a huge help
Yeah.
because they could be there for up to 2 hours if they have to be, and that 2 hour break 5 days a week when you're
Yeah.
burnout that's a blessing. So.
Yeah. Right, because they could go to the grocery store, maybe,
Yep.
or take a nap, or take a walk, or something like that. So no, I think a hospital, and if they need supplies, they can order
It's
supplies
the other
too.
thing,
Yeah.
that financial burden kind of starts getting taken over a little bit by Medicare at that point, right? They're sending out a lot of supplies for you too. So,
Right. And if you have any issues, I mean, if we had any issues, we could always call the nurse, and the nurse would come out, or we talk to them on the phone. And hospice is I can't speak more highly of hospice, and everybody, they're special people. I mean, you guys are special people, that you're a special breed that work with hospice. Because I used to do when I did home care in Virginia, I worked with a lot of the hospice nurses, and they're just it's a great organization that people need to look into more. And you also have palliative care as well.
Palliative
if you
as
can
well.
explain what palliative is.
So palliative is, it's more of like when people aren't quite ready for hospice, they're able to have that symptom management through palliative care, like with pain and stuff, because they'll get the palliative physician, the nurse practitioner, and they're able to take care of those medications and keep that person comfortable at home as well.
Right.
So palliative doesn't quite offer the amount of resources that hospice does, but it is another benefit worth looking into if you don't qualify for hospice, because it is still more support. It's not as much, but it can be very helpful still.
Right, because you don't need as much if you're at that status that you need palliative care. If you're not at the hospice level, then the palliative care is great that it kicks in. And if it advances to the hospice, then you can roll over into hospice.
You just roll right over. Yeah.
Right. So that's great. That's great. What small realistic habits can help caregivers protect their energy?
Small realistic habits. So that all starts with developing a routine. And the routine is a big double-edged sword, because especially if you're dealing with dementia, the routine, constantly doing the same thing every day, is best for the patient. And then that routine is also good for you. Now in that routine, it's very important to make sure that you are taking time to yourself. I recommend an hour a day. So trying to figure out how to get that hour a day to yourself. If they're taking a nap, don't waste that time. Don't sit there and worry and hover and whatever we do as caregivers, because it's our loved one. But you really have to take that time to yourself, whether you're watching something on TV, reading a book, listening to music, going for a walk. You could do Pilates, anything. Whatever gets your mind off the task and gives you that little bit of a break, it can go a long way.
True. Yeah, just thinking of something, right? Just thinking of something else, focusing on something else. Like, if you like murder mysteries, or if you like concerts, you're thinking about something else for that hour.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that all goes back into the cognitive model, because you want to bring back the positive thoughts. So if that's going to put you in a positive headspace, now you have positive thoughts. That's going to lead to the positive emotions, back to the positive mood. And when you're in a positive mood, you're going to be a lot better of a caregiver than if you're in that negative burnout mood.
Good. Well, that's good. That's great advice. My quote of the day is, "You cannot pour from an empty cup. Caring for yourself is part of caring for others." Because it's like there was a book, put your oxygen mask on first.
Absolutely.
If you're a caregiver, if you're totally burned out, then you're not doing as much good for your caregiver. Easier said than done. It's a lot easier said than done. But if you know of people who are a caregiver, people just kind of reach out, and ask them what you can do. Maybe you can't, like I said, you can't mow the lawn or whatever. But if you can, depending on the person, whether you can just sit with them. Sometimes it's kind of hard if you have a dementia patient that maybe you can't necessarily sit with them if it depends on their behavior, but there's something that you can do. So,
Absolutely. Anything helps. So like you said, there's something you can do, and that something is going to be huge for the caregiver.
right,
So anything helps.
right. Even if it's like an hour a week or an hour every other week, just something, just every little bit helps to the caregiver.
Yeah.
So,
You bring up the oxygen mask. That's actually my famous spiel. It's the first thing I say to all caregivers when I come in. I ask them if they've ever been on an airplane before, and the flight attendant goes through that little spiel, and you put your oxygen mask on first before you try to help somebody else put theirs on, because if you don't, you're not gonna be able to help yourself. You're not gonna be able to help anybody.
right.
Caregiving is exactly the same. It's exactly the same.
Right. Yeah. Because like your kid, if you have kids on the plane, right? If you don't put your oxygen mask on first, you're no help to the child because you're passed out. Because you're
Exactly.
passed out.
Mhm.
So it's the same with your caregivers. So, yeah. Was there anything else that I haven't mentioned that you'd like to discuss or?
Oh man, we could go on forever. So we'll have to do it again. Maybe dive into some local resources a little bit more to try to help out those people that don't have anybody to come in and
Okay. Well, that
help
would
them
be.
out.
Do you know of some that you could mention? I mean, we can go into more detail in another episode.
We
But
brought up Joe's Club, and the reason that I use those guys a lot as a great example is because the financial strain is so much, and everything seems to cost money now. So Joe's Club actually does a great job. They talked about it the other night. They get grants, and those grants are actually able to be applied to help lowering that cost for caregivers. So Joe's Club's a great resource. There's a bunch of private duty aid companies in the area. Call around, get the best price. And then when all else fails, you have the Senior Resource Center here. And you also have 211 is a great option to call. And just,
yeah, if you just need to talk. You
yeah.
need to talk it through. But helping seniors of Brevard is a good, they do have resources. And Nancy is, she's a great resource, to speak to. So if you call and call here, she can help them out.
And I promise you that they call you back.
Yes,
People
yes.
say that they didn't
Yes.
answer. Well, they will call you back. Leave a message and your number and everything. They will call you back.
Right. And the reason that she doesn't, like, if she's talking to somebody either on the phone or in person, she doesn't want to interrupt the conversation. So, so when you call and you leave a message, she will get back to you as soon as she can. So, yeah, this is a wonderful, wonderful place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, Zach, it was great talking with you today, and hopefully our caregivers have like a few ideas, and people that are friends and relatives, can reach out and try to help them out a little bit more, and and some ways to cope. Sharing.
Try them.
Yeah, sharing your ways to cope is great. So
Start working on that plan now. Cut that burnout out because
yeah. Because you got to take care of yourself, and and the motives are noble. People, we all wanted to take care of our parents because we love them, and they were good. Like my mom was a great mom, and so we always took care of each other. I was single, never married, no kids, so it was like, so my mom and I we took care of each other all the time through life. She took care of me, in hard times. I mean, raising me in some hard times that I had. So I just really wanted to take care of her.
she was lucky to have you.
Yeah, I was lucky to have her. But anyway,
It's a mutual thing, right?
yeah, it was mutual. So anyway, so thanks again, Zach. I appreciate the time that you spent with us.
Absolutely.
Yes, and thank Zach, and I look forward to our next episode of Time with Terry. And just a reminder, reach out to someone and be a blessing, and you'll be blessed too. Bye.